My name is Emily Wykoff, and I'm one of your General Assembly VPs.
Hi, my name is Bullock-Papa, and I'm your Secretary General.
Hi, I'm Siddiqui, and I'm your Secretary Liaison.
Hi, my name is Angelova, and I'm one of your General Assembly VPs.
Today we're going to be discussing debate training and parliamentary procedure at Model UN. Take it away, y'all.
So at the beginning of every Model UN conference, every resolution will be heard in committee and ranked. The top-ranked resolutions will be presented later in the conference to larger and larger groups to be passed or failed. So the process by which a resolution is heard and ranked is called debate. And debate is run according to a set of rules called parliamentary procedure. So in terms of timing and format of debate, you have a 2-minute introduction at first, and then you go into 2 minutes of technical questions. And then you have con-pro debate, which is 5 minutes, 1 minute per round. And you end with your summation, and then ranking procedure if you're in committee, or voting procedure if you're in the GA.
For your introduction, this is an uninterrupted 2-minute speech, and it's a great chance for the sponsor of the resolution to introduce their resolution. A good introduction briefly explains the problem you are trying to solve, and then pitches your solution to the rest of the General Assembly.
What makes a strong introduction?
Well, much like an essay, a strong introduction opens with a hook. You want to draw in members of other delegations, catch their interest, and make them pay attention to what you have to say. Then give about a 20-second rundown of your resolution. Next, show how applicable and beneficial your resolution is to the Model UN body as a whole. And at the end, you want to urge low ranking and yield the remainder of your time to your summation.
I would just add that don't feel like you need to use all of the introduction time. You can save that later for your conclusion, which is oftentimes very helpful to respond to points that other people brought up during debate.
Technical questions. So technical questions are meant for members of the General Assembly to clarify items in a resolution. They are quick, non-debatable questions that can be answered with a yes or no, a number, a statistic, or a definition. Technical questions will be asked in the order in which the chair recognizes the speaker. To ask a technical question, state your name and country, and then ask your question. If somebody has already marked your question, either ask a different one or state your name and country, followed by, my question has been answered.
What makes a good technical question?
So a good technical question can be a way to clear a statistical point about the resolution or to make a point about the resolution itself. So they're on the whole questions that aren't argumentative and can be answered only with facts, so that you don't have to spend your time researching, and instead you can spend your time listening to the arguments being made. Some examples of technical questions are, what is the GDP in your country? What's the population of your country? How big is your country in square miles? And how would you describe your country's physical features and climate? So the common trend among those that you've probably noticed is they're all very quick to answer. You're not trying to start an argument in technical questions.
Pro-con debate is the most time-consuming part of the entire debate. So the order goes, it's 5 rounds, con, pro, con, pro, con. So pro-con debate begins and ends with a con speech. And this is to help balance out the extra pro time that the resolution sponsor or patron gets to give with their introduction and summation. And the summation will come right after the last con round. So each segment of pro-con debate is 1 minute long, and during that minute, a recognized speaker can either address the floor, ask the patron a series of questions, or yield the remainder of their time to a fellow delegate or the chair. So you must announce your intent when you're recognized.
And so addressing the floor, by doing this, it's your opportunity to tell the General Assembly how you feel about a resolution. If you're in the pro slot, talk about why the resolution succeeds, which parts are most notable, and how passing the resolution will benefit other countries or the UN in total. If you're in the con slot, talk why the resolution fails. Either it fails to address the problem is not of international concern, there are unintended consequences of the resolution, etc. Con speeches should not be used for personal attacks, value judgment, or impeaching the patron's credibility. False cons or pros, also known as sarcastic speeches, are not allowed at Model UN. And this is a great time if you don't want to cross-examine a delegation to blatantly state why you think a resolution is either good or bad. And finally, to address the floor, state your name and country followed by may I address the floor. So if I were at Model UN last year, I would have said Wykoff, Thailand, may I address the floor.
So, asking your patron a series of questions. This is often one of the most useful ways to understand a resolution. Your opportunity to have a lengthy conversation with the authors of a resolution. These questions can be more open-ended or argumentative, comparative to the technical questions. Your question should have one focus or build to one larger point. A random spew of questions is not an effective way to convince other delegates. Your questions need to not necessarily be slanted pro-con here. If no one wants to give a con speech, you can ask a neutral series of questions to fill up a con speaking slot.
What are some examples of a good series of questions?
I think it depends on the situation, but the intention of the series of questions should be to prove a point. So you're asking for $40 million, is that correct? Is it true that your country has already spent $500 million on this project? What will this $40 million do to that $500 million couldn't? That would be a wonderful example of that.
And when should you ask a series of questions versus addressing the floor? How do you choose which one is going to be more effective?
Well, if you're very passionate and you believe that addressing the floor is the way to go, and you really have a point that you're trying to build to, then addressing the floor would be great. But if you simply did not understand the purpose of this resolution or really understand what the speaker was going at, then that's when you should ask a series of questions.
And as a reminder, you do have a limited amount of time. So if you are going to, go into a long spiel about how so much money has been used already, and if it's a point that is worth bringing up, addressing the floor and sharing your opinion is a great way to do that. But if your question could have been answered by the delegates, that may be an easier way of doing that, especially if, as we'll talk about later, you're planning on yielding your time to someone else.
And you can also use that same tactic in a pro round. Now, you can ask questions that maybe you already know the answer to because you've done some research, but the whole audience may not know. So you could ask, do you think that this will truly help, or is it true that so-and-so happened? And that will make the patrons as a whole look better in front of their audience.
And you can think of it in this manner as well. Imagine you're in a court case, right? If you want to cross-examine your witness and get them to reveal evidence that is contradictory to what they claim will happen, asking a series of questions is great because, as stated before, if you know the answer to a question that will be detrimental to their resolution, by all means ask it. But if you're clearly just stating your opinion, then address the floor. And I've seen some great people address the floor, some really convincing speeches. And I've also seen some great cross-examinations of delegates. So either way, you really can't lose.
So remember that to ask a series of questions, you need to state your name and then your country, followed by do the patrons yield to a possible series of questions. So if I wanted to lead with that, I would say Bullock-Papa, Nicaragua, do the patrons yield to a possible series of questions? But if instead you would rather address the floor, you could say Bullock-Papa, Nicaragua, may I address the floor? And the chair will tell you yes, and then you can go on and do either one of those things.
Yielding the remainder of your time to a fellow delegate. That can be a really nice thing to do. Let's talk about that. This allows you to allot the remainder of your minute to someone else. They will have 1 minute minus the time that you spoke. So if you spoke for 20 seconds, they will have 40 seconds to speak. You may yield to anyone, but it is generally poor etiquette to yield to another member of your country delegation or to someone who has already spoken on a resolution. If you are only addressing the floor or asking a series of questions, it is good form to yield the remainder of your time. So you're not just giving 40 seconds extra to the chair when someone else could share their opinion as well. To yield your time, state your name and country, then whether you'd like to address the floor, ask a series of questions, followed by, and may I reserve the right to yield the remainder of my time to a fellow delegate. Once you've finished speaking, you may say, and I yield the remainder of my time to the delegate from insert country here. The yielded delegate will be informed how much time they have by the chair, and the yielded delegate can only address the floor or ask a series of questions. They must state their name and country, then intent. They themselves cannot yield their time to the floor.
I just want to add really quickly before we move on that although it's technically just good etiquette to yield the remainder of your time, that is extremely strongly encouraged.
Yes.
It is not good form to use up the entire minute, generally speaking, and it is especially bad form to just stop talking and yield your time to the chair. The people who are tracking whether or not awards will be given are watching for that kind of behavior, so make sure that you're giving your remaining time to people who haven't spoken as much. The delegate, when you are finishing up your resolution, you get one last chance to talk and set the tone before people either rank your resolution or pass or fail it in the General Assembly. So this is your last chance. So it's very important that you're taking advantage of the time that you have, which is another reason we recommend that you don't use all of your introduction time and you save some of it for your conclusion. So with that time, generally the first thing you want to do is recap some of the points against you if you have time and address them. you will be the last voice heard on it, and that's super powerful to be able to shut down those arguments right before people rank it, so they don't have any like wavering like thoughts or doubts in their mind. Like you can just shut it down so it's very obvious that you were prepared, that you know what you're talking about, and that you're right. So spend that time, and then if you have any more time at the end, do like a 10-second pretty wrap up. You can come up with a catchphrase or something, it doesn't really matter. Committee 27 will now be called to order. Would the patrons of Red House Bill 18-27-1304 please come forward?
Yes.
Patrons, you are recognized for 2 minutes for your introduction. You may begin when ready.
19% of the fauna located in the Mediterranean Sea are currently threatened with extinction. This number is absurd, as it is roughly half of the percentage of the global endangered rate of 38% and still only confined in one small region of the world. Up to 25,000 species of flora reside in the Mediterranean Sea, with about 60% of those species being unique to the area. This extraordinary amount of biodiversity makes the Mediterranean an area that should be a top priority for the UN to protect. Our solution is applicable to every UN member state that resides around the Mediterranean Sea. By urging other countries to join MedPen and help establish and care for MPAs, as well as provide scientists who specialize in the field, we will be able to ensure the protection of this great body of water for generations to come. In conclusion, we urge low ranking and yield the remainder of our time to the summation.
With that, 1 minute and 30 seconds is added to the patron summation, and we will now move into technical questions. Are there any technical questions? Ukraine, Sudan, and Canada.
Siddiqui, Ukraine. What is the population of Monaco?
The population is 38,400.
Angelova, Sudan. What is your GDP?
Our GDP is roughly $7.188 billion US.
How much of Monaco is coastal?
Delegate, you are out of order. Please state your name and country.
Thank you.
With that, we will now move into con for debate. Is there a con speaker on the floor? Ukraine.
Siddiqui, Ukraine. May I address the floor? May I also yield the remainder of my time to a fellow delegate?
That is your right. Please select a delegate.
Door. No, not Door. Canada.
Canada.
Fellow delegates, I believe that this resolution is not fully thought through and is unnecessary because Monaco is too rich and they are contributing to the destruction of marine biodiversity. I yield the remainder of my time to a fellow delegate.
With that, the delegate yields 30 seconds to Canada.
Door Canada, do the patrons yield to a possible series of questions?
They do so yield.
Do you know how much of Monaco is coastal?
All of Monaco is coastal.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, we will now move into a round of pro debate. Do we have any pro speakers on the floor? Sudan.
Angelova, Sudan. May I address the floor?
That is your right.
And may I yield the remainder of my time to a fellow delegate?
That is also your right. Please select a delegate.
Canada. Ukraine.
Ukraine.
Fellow delegates, the Mediterranean ecosystem is fundamental to all marine life, seeing as that the Mediterranean Sea accounts for 18% of the world's marine biodiversity. It is imperative that we put forth the necessary restrictions to protect these fragile ecosystems. For that reason, I strongly urge a low ranking of this resolution. I yield the remainder of my time to Ukraine.
Siddiqui, Ukraine. Do the patrons yield to a possible series of questions?
They do so yield.
Why is your country's government so passionate about biodiversity now?
Well, the amount of biodiversity within the Mediterranean Sea is a treasure trove that should be held for future generations. Without this rich resource, we will have an increased level of extinct species and an increased level, especially due to global warming as the years continue.
Thank you.
With that, we will now move into our second round of con debate. Is there a con speaker on the floor? Canada.
Door Canada, how long before these protections kick
Delegate,
in?
please state your intent.
Oh, Door Canada, do the patrons yield to a possible series of questions?
They do so yield.
How long will it take before these protections go into effect?
It really depends on how fast each country is willing to move, because we are not asking for a certain pace. We're asking for all countries that, especially in the south region of the Mediterranean Sea, putting forth the effort to start these projects, which have yet to be completed.
Thank you. I yield the remainder of my time to the chair.
In the future, please remember to yield the remainder of your time to a fellow delegate. We will now move into our second round of pro debate. Do we have a pro speaker on the floor? Sudan.
Angelova, Sudan. Do the patrons yield to a possible series of questions?
They do so yield.
And may I yield the remainder of my time to a fellow delegate?
That is your right. Please select a delegate.
There are currently no delegates on the floor.
That is alright. Just use your time.
Patron, are you aware that over the course of the past century, close to 30% of the world's marine biodiversity has depleted?
Yes.
And do you agree that by implementing this project, you will help to increase the rate of biodiversity and help restore growth?
100%. I think that these efforts will keep this resource alive for generations, especially in a world that is constantly being wrought by global warming.
And what do you believe is the main cause of this depletion in biodiversity?
Well, the amount of gas used in fishing boats that is leaked out, or oil spillage, as well as...
Delegates, we are out of time. We'll now move into our third and final round of con. Do we have a con speaker on the floor? Canada.
Door, Canada, do the patrons yield to a possible series of questions, and may I reserve my right to address the floor afterwards?
They do so yield, and that is your right.
Thank you. What is the current plan in your resolution for splitting these costs among the different UN member states?
It depends on how much money each country is willing to contribute, and that will depend on how much they are able to contribute.
Thank you. My fellow delegates, while I am in favor of the idea of this proposal and do think that there need to be significant protections put in place in the Mediterranean Sea, I am afraid that I cannot support a resolution that doesn't have an explicit funding plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Patrons, you are recognized for 2 minutes and 30 seconds for your summation. You may begin when ready.
Wykoff, Monaco. In conclusion, global hotspots for biodiversity will not be able to protect themselves in the years to come. We must act before it is too late and begin protecting areas that need it most. The UN has the unique ability to bring together nations under a single goal, bettering the globe. This resolution is vital to the future of our world, and without immediate action, we will be unable to leave this treasure trove of biodiversity for future generations. Therefore, we urge low ranking of our resolution and yield the remainder of our time.
With that, we are now moving into ranking procedure. Remember, if you really like the way a resolution was presented, you should be ranking it low. You should be giving it a 1 instead of a 5. If you disagree or think that something wasn't factual, then you should be ranking it higher.
How do you guys prepare for debate before the conference? What are strategies or tips you would recommend for practicing debate before you arrive?
So I'm going to actually answer this from the point of view of somebody who is presenting a resolution, because what you need to remember is that debate applies to you too, because there's a series of questions that I guarantee somebody will stand up and ask you a question. It will be a technical question, it will be pro or con. Basically, my advice is be researched. Create a spreadsheet. I think that's a very helpful way to keep track of different information because it's very quick to look at. Memorize a few basic facts. You should know your country's GDP. You should roughly know what the population is. If you're dealing with a specific issue like you want your water to be cleaner, you should know how much water you need to be cleaner, how many people die from a disease. If you're flipping through papers the whole time, it doesn't look that great, but it's a lot better than just not knowing it all. So my first piece of advice is memorize the basic facts. My second piece of advice is at least have them. Don't go in unprepared.
A lot of you have government clubs in your school that encompass both Model UN and Youth in Government. And if some of you don't have a big delegation or people who are experienced, that's totally okay. Talk to your supervisor, talk to the officers in your club, talk to the officers at MUN conference. Hey, we're all here to help you. So do like a practice round of debate. Give them your resolution and ask them, can you give me questions that, you think you wonder about my solution? Like, it doesn't hurt to ask for help, and we're all here for you too.
Hey, to build on that, even before you submit your resolution for the first deadline for Model UN, ask people to read it, especially if you know people who've gone to Model UN before or have done it a couple times. It's a great idea to hand your resolution to someone and say, hey, if you were to calm this, what would you do? What holes do I need to fix? What questions do I need to be prepared for? Is there something I'm missing? And that is, utilize those opportunities, because I didn't, and my first resolution got totally trashed. So make sure, people want to help you. Everyone at Model UN is super nice, so just ask for help and you'll receive it.
So this isn't so much for preparation, but as Emily was saying, should someone ask you a question that you don't have an answer to or statistic for, don't get flustered. Either try to transition into a different topic or simply just admit it. You don't have that statistic at the moment, and have your partner look it up so you can bring it up in your conclusion.
Do not try and make something up.
Any tips for either, like if you're nervous about remembering the Parley Pro rules, or you're nervous to get up during the conference and ask a series of questions, like tips for preparing for that moment?
Imagine everyone in their underwear. I'm just kidding, don't do that. But honestly, I'd say the best way to do it is what I did my freshman year especially, is I would write down all the procedures on a piece of paper and I would just bring it up with me. There's no shame having a piece of paper up there. Almost everyone has it, and it's much better to have that reference than to get it wrong and be fined.
I've done that every single year. I've been doing Model UN since 8th grade, same for youth and government. Every time I go up to talk, I have it written down.
If you bring a computer with you, I highly suggest that you do, by the way. Check out the Tennessee CCE website, that's tennesseecce.org, and there will be a section for high school youth and government, which you will register on, but there's also like a packet of debate format and parliamentary procedure, so keep that in a tab all weekend, and like split screen if you need it, but trust me, that's what I did, and it's very helpful.
And this is more applicable to committee, but especially the first day, your chair wants you to talk. I will be a VP this year. I will be chairing a committee. I want you to talk. I want everyone to be able to have a chance to share their opinion or to ask a question. That's the point of Model UN.
So an issue that a lot of delegates face during the conference, and I know because I've been there, is you're in committee or General Assembly for hours, and it can be boring at times. And the best way to combat that boredom is to be more engaged than you think you should be. So even if you don't get the chance to talk about a resolution, you should be taking notes so that you could, if they did call on your placard, have something meaningful to say. If you are even just standing up for technical questions every time, at least you know what's going on. That's something to pay attention to. We don't, it's very bad etiquette to be on your phone the whole time in assembly or really any time when somebody's presenting. So like you can be on there for a few seconds for research and that kind of thing, but by and large you should be writing things down, you should be trying to speak, and that's the best way to combat the boredom.
Alright, I know a lot of you who are doing this for the first year are underclassmen, and it can be really scary. You probably just listened to all of this and thought, oh my gosh, that is way too much for me to remember. How am I going to do this entire weekend? And it might seem scary, but it is absolutely worth it. It is the most fun weekend ever. And don't be afraid to talk. Don't be afraid to debate. That's what we're all here for. We love to see you guys learn and grow. And so do the conference directors. So don't be afraid. We're all here for you.